Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today it's the cost of sharing our research. Hi, if you're new here, my name is Caroline. I'm a senior lecturer. I work at a UK university and I specialise in physics. If you're returning back to the channel, it's lovely to have you join for another video, another academic conversation. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about not the hidden costs, but the costs associated with sharing our research. Because sometimes I think these kind of topics maybe don't get enough kind of airtime or consideration. So yeah, one of the key things that I think we do as academic researchers is obviously our research. That's the bit of the job that I think many of us sign up for initially, is to be able to pursue and study an area of something that really fascinates and interests us. And when you do that research at various points along the way, you want to tell other people about it. So typically, yes, you're going to tell your friends and your family, but you want to tell the academic community, you want to tell other researchers, colleagues at other universities, people who might be working outside of the academic sector, but who might be interested or working on parallel techniques to what you're working on. You basically want to get your research ideas out into the wider community. And these days, there's even more ways that we can do this. I think in the past, it used to be that as the academic, you would do a piece of research, then you would write it up, and you would publish that piece of research in a journal. And today, we still do that an awful lot, right? So, the bulk of our I think, getting our message out there is typically still through journal publications. However, of course, we've also now got all the social media platforms. So you see people putting things up on what was Twitter, now X, people putting things up on YouTube, people putting things into more kind of conversational magazines. And it's really exciting, I guess, because that's sharing the reach and the audience that can engage with the research topic that we're particularly passionate about as well. But the thing I really I guess, want to highlight is that when we put these pieces of research either into journals or journal publication, or when we take our research and go to a conference with it, there is typically a cost associated with it. And if you're working in academia, you'll know immediately what I mean by this. So if you're going to a conference to share your research, the majority of conferences are going to charge a conference registration fee. So in order to be at that event, you have to pay a sum of money. Now that can be small, so it can be a small contribution, and maybe it covers the food or the venue location, or it can be quite a sizable kind of pot of money that you might need to provide to go to that particular conference. So I've been to conferences where I've been asked to maybe pay a registration fee of £50. I'm in the UK, don't forget. And some of my top end conferences that I'll go to, they might be asking me to pay somewhere between £600 to maybe £800 to go and actually attend that conference. And of course, that's before you add on to things, your travel. So if you're flying somewhere, your train tickets, your hotel accommodation, you need a visa to enter that country. The actual cost of attending a conference to share your research can, quickly add up. And it's something that when we write our research grant application, so when I'm writing these grants to try to win money for research projects, and these are research projects that might be completed by PhD students or master students or maybe postdoctoral research fellows, you have to remember to write in to your budget money to cover the cost of that person going to a conference and presenting their research. And interestingly, I've noticed that quite often conferences actually ask you to pay more if you are actively presenting your research. And so by that I mean, if you're going to the conference and you're going just as a participant, so you're not giving a talk, you're not presenting a poster, you're going to be there in the audience listening to the talks, the conference might ask you to pay one registration fee. But if you're going to the conference and you've been accepted to give a talk, or you've been accepted to prepare a poster and then show your poster, you may be asked to pay a higher registration fee. And at least when I think about it, it always feels a little bit odd, this. So those people who are going to the conference and are technically contributing knowledge to that conference are actually paying more money than the people who are going to the conference, and I guess the people who are kind of maybe learning or engaging with the knowledge at the conference, but not actually providing maybe a formal talk or a formal poster. Now, of course, everyone there will be networking, will be exchanging ideas. So you can say that everyone is playing an active role at these events. And I guess the conferences might come back and say, well, if your work's been accepted, typically your work might go into a conference proceedings afterwards. So you might get a publication out of your attendance at the conference. And so maybe those higher fees are also to cover some of the production costs associated with your publication that comes out of the conference. And I guess that very neatly links into my next point. And that is when we put our research into publications. So when I take a bit of research and we write it up to be a journal paper and we apply to a journal, say, hey, can we publish it within your journal, please? Yes, that piece of work is typically going to get peer reviewed. There are some journals that don't do peer review, but the majority of them are typically going to peer review that piece of work. And then you have to consider the costs of actually getting your research article printed in that journal. And I think I've touched on this in the past, how some journals are open access, and that means anybody can read the articles that are inside that journal. But for the author, therefore, you have to pay a higher fee to have your work in that journal, because then there aren't any fees in order to read the material afterwards. And alternatively, some of these journals, I guess, are what we'd call journals behind a paywall. So in order to read that journal, you have to have a subscription and belong, if you like, to that journal paper club. And then when you publish your paper in it, you publish and you might be able to pay a slightly lower fee because people who are going to be reading that work have also paid a fee to access the journal. And there's various routes that people do to get around these systems. Some people are very firm believers that everything should go into open access journals, and they will pay the associated cost to do that. But that cost can be non-trivial. So it's not uncommon to be expecting to pay maybe the best part of £1,000 to be putting your research into an open access journal. Alternatively, some researchers might decide to put their work into these journals, but ones behind a paywall. But maybe they'll use some kind of archiving system in order to try to make their journal paper as open access as possible to other researchers. But again, there's a cost involved. So you've done your piece of research, you want to share it, but you go to a conference and there's a cost involved with showing your research at a conference, and you put it into a journal, and there is typically a cost associated with putting your work into a journal. Really interestingly, when we're asked as academics to peer review, and this is something I really engage and believe in, that we should be reviewing pieces of work for each other, because that's what keeps our academic rigor and our academic standard up. But when you are asked to read somebody else's work and kind of give an opinion on whether that study has got maybe gaps or areas it could be improved upon before publication, you are typically not paid. So although the person is paid to have their work to go into the journal, you may be involved as part of the reviewing process. You will typically not get any kind of uplift to your salary or any kind of money for doing that. And again, I can understand there might be good reason for that. They're wanting to maintain academic impartiality. I can't even say the word. But, because there isn't a financial incentive, I guess the idea is that you're then reviewing that piece of technical work, that piece of research, out of the good of the academic community. And the idea is that you will do it for other people and they will do it in return for your piece of work coming back. So yeah, I just would be interested in your views on this. I think a lot of our research might be funded through public lines of funding. A lot of it might come through research councils, which are supported bodies, which essentially might be using public money to fund research. So I always think it's really important to share your research findings and results with the community as much as you possibly can. And by the community, I mean not only my fellow academics, my fellow colleagues, maybe in industry, but also the wider public. And I think because of that, that's why I end up doing a lot of outreach. So, I'll go out and I'll do work at festivals, and I'll do maybe comedy stuff, and I'll do lectures for groups in the evening, all to kind of share and engage research. But equally, if I go down the formal channels, so the conferences and the publications, there are costs associated. And I think typically your progression within a university, so your ability to go from one grade all the way up to another grade, so maybe from lecturer to senior lecturer to reader professor, we do still need to show these publication records. We do still need to show that we're active on conferences sharing our research, which means we do still need to finance somehow within our research grants, getting our research out into these kind of outlets. So let me know your thoughts. I've got no answers on this. It's just kind of observation of where we are as a community at the moment. But let me know, do you always try to go for certain journals because they're very good for your particular area? Are those journals expensive to get into? Are they cheap to get into? Do large conference registration fees put you off being able to travel? Do you sometimes have to send your students but not be able to travel with them because you're trying to save your budget? Just let me know in the comments, how do you find the financial landscape with regards to being able to share your exciting research outputs? In the meantime, we are now about to hit exam season, so it's our summer exam period at the university. So the students will be facing the next couple of weeks in the exam halls, doing their exam papers, and then we will hit the summer period and all the nice things that come with summer, the research time, the graduations, all the lovely things we can chat about in the future. But in the meantime, have a great week. Keep looking after yourselves, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.